I've just watched this really. I've been watching lots actually, lovely tributes to Robin Williams. Just obviously by the time this vlog goes to air, it'll be old news, but it's just fairly current news at the moment. And I just recently watched a Philip Seymour Hoffman movie. And as a recovering addict, when I'm giving keynotes, I often refer to Robin Williams and Billy Connolley because they're both recovering addicts in recovery that also claim, they own unashamedly the fact that they're introverts. And I remember hearing Robin Williams in the stand-up routine talking about the fact that people always expect him to be on, but when he's on the stage, he's on. And then when he gets off, he's quite a quite introverted man and he goes home and often he just goes back into his shell to recharge because he has to push so much energy out on stage. And he was saying how he'd been in bed for, maybe 48 hours. And he said, the dog walked in and said, you gotta get up sometime. And I'm somebody that uses Doona therapy a lot because when you're clean and sober and you hit overwhelm or you overstep one of your boundaries or you expend, your ego writes checks with your emotional energy that you can't cash and you go into overdraft, you often have to do Doona therapy, which is what I do. And I remember hearing that, and watching when you're a recovering addict like I am, long-term sobriety is rare. People that get up over 10 years and it's rare, it thins out, and then up over 20 years. I remember being in a recovery meeting in Hawaii about 5 years ago. And, in different countries, they do recovery meetings in different ways. And they asked everybody that had longer than a year clean and sober to stand up. So I stood up, and it was a big meeting, in Hawaii. There was probably 60, 70 people there. So I stood up, and then they said, remain standing if you've got longer than 2 years. And, probably 90% of the people remained standing. Remain standing if you've got longer than 5 years. And thinned out to about 60%. Remain standing if you've got longer than 10 years. 10% of the room was standing. Then I looked around, there was only me and another woman and, a handful of men. And they said, remain standing if you've got longer than 15 years. And I was the only woman left standing in the room with a few other men. Now, if I get to October 12th, this year, 2014, it'll be 19 years. But when I look upon, elders in recovery that are open about their recovery, the likes of Robin Williams and Billy Connolley, that talk about their introverted battles as hypersensitives, and trying to do life clean and sober. And, I know Philip Seymour Hoffman was another, and, addict in recovery. And, the longer you go in recovery, the harder it gets because the whole recovery process is about owning who you are. And the reality is most addicts, I often sort of say when I'm in rehabs, I've been doing the Royal Brisbane Hospital detox unit now for 15 years. And I often say, we could call the recovery circles, Introverts Anonymous. Sure, there are some extroverted people in recovery, but it's interesting, those people that are often extroverted in the full flight drinking and drugging, you take the armoury away, you take drugs and alcohol away. And you watch the little introverts, they're quite quiet people. Many of us, I would say the vast majority of addicts, I would say it, I've been working with addicts for nearly 20 years, and I would honestly say from my experience that 80% of addicts are introverted personalities. Anyway, listening to Jimmy Fallon do a lovely tribute to Robin Williams and also talking about depression and that being a really loaded subject because, I remember when I was first put into a psychiatric hospital at 18 months clean and sober. I was wedged between a wardrobe and a wall because without drugs and alcohol, all the sewage and the trauma of my childhood, where there's a lot of violence and sexual abuse, came back. And I remember my therapist, a leading Brisbane psychiatrist, saying, Cynthia, and we had a first session together, and he said, there is clinical depression and then there is experiential depression or exogenous depression that's a byproduct of a lot of external trauma. And he said, you have chronic post-traumatic stress and I'm not going to medicate you because this is not a chemical imbalance, it's a byproduct of trauma. he said, but you're going to have to give me 5 to 7 years because this is intricate work. So I've not ever been medicated, but do I get depressed and homicidal and suicidal? Yeah, but I have absolute respect. You know, there are some people that are clinically depressed, and that's a biochemical imbalance, and you know, that's a very challenging way to live, especially as an addict in recovery. So for myself, you know, these days, doing a therapy and self-care, because the longer I'm sober, the more exposed I am to the outside world, and often, you know, I feel like a turtle without a shell. Life and human beings and company and the people, the non-addicts, like aliens, like another race. And I'm married to a non-addict. God love him. He's a fearless, beautiful, beautiful soul that doesn't struggle with drugs or alcohol or cigarettes. And he's very good for me because he takes my hand, and with him I am safe. But not all of us are that blessed. So, yeah. Tribute to Robin Williams. What a blessing his energy was on this planet.